Border Limit. This is a kind of conversation between Chile, Argentina, and different kinds of colleagues from other museums and cultural heritage sites. This kind of conversation are making between the museum from Argentina, historical Sarmiento's museum, and the one museum from Chile, the pharmacy and chemic from Santiago de Chile. So, Monia, in relation with your PhD research, can you explain us how we have to proceed after the earthquake, for example, and what are the implications with the cultural heritage, and what kind of procedures we have to do? I mean, the first steps.
Hi Virginia, and thanks for inviting me today. Before answering your questions, let me first introduce myself. My name is Monia del Pinto, and I'm a PhD student in urban planning and disaster risk reduction. And since the very beginning of my professional journey in the built environment, I've been dealing with architecture in the form of buildings and settlements, historical settlements, in earthquake-prone areas, so starting from my hometown, which is L'Aquila, and the post-earthquake reconstruction. So earthquake brings me to your first question, that is, how do we deal with the heritage, and in particular with museums, in the post-earthquake scenario? Before talking about that, before defining the operations that we can undertake in the post-earthquake scenario, an important point that I think needs to be made is in relation to what we can do before, particularly for the heritage sites, so museums, archaeological sites, historic buildings. A crucial, vital step is having in place disaster risk management plan for cultural heritage, to be designed and outlined in times of peace, which means to be thought about and with a risk and vulnerability assessment before the disaster happens, so that we have already in place specific measures to mitigate the impact of any potential disruption and to increase our preparedness in the case of an earthquake or a flood, or even in the case of a pandemic like this. It may be useful to have in place measures, whatever they are, and to be prepared to changes so that our response is faster and more appropriate, I would say. Then if we move to the next step, which is the post-earthquake scenario, if we are in the conditions to rescue, we need to rescue, to salvage heritage objects. Let's say the case, as you made the hypothesis of a museum affected by the earthquake and collections from the museum that need to be recovered. The operations, okay, the post-disaster, the post-earthquake scenario is very delicate already, because we operate in a context where damage already has been done. I mean, the earthquake already damaged either the structure or the object, or even both. Most likely we're going to find both of them damaged. So what we need to do before is, first of all, being guided by the principle of not increasing that damage. So we need to be aware that when we get to the site and when we operate on the site, we need to be extremely careful and extremely prepared. To be prepared, we need to assess the scenario before with an accurate situation analysis, which means dealing with the museum director, the museum manager, or the community if no one else is available, and trying to understand what we are looking for, what the values that we are looking for are, what the objects that we need to rescue are, and what they look like, what their values, not just the values, but also the features are, because we need to know if we are going to handle paper or canvas or pottery or wood, and so we need to be prepared on how to operate afterwards. Once the situation analysis is clear and ready and we move on site, it is important to secure the site, so to make it safe for the operators, so like us, or even community members that are going to help us, prepared of course. So we need to secure the site so that we all have access and we are safe enough to accomplish our mission. Once we are on site, we proceed to the proper salvage, which again depends on what we find there. It depends on what objects we are expecting to find, and based on that we have to be prepared on handling them appropriately and moving them to a safe place, to a safe storage, before the same objects will be moved to the conservation or the restoration lab.
When you start thinking about the cultural heritage care is important, I mean, you started thinking about this out of the blue or from the very beginning?
The blue? Well, the answer to this question is, I think already in my introduction, like you can't think about cultural heritage and built environment as two distinct entities. The moment you work with the built environment, within the built environment, you directly or indirectly operate with and need to be aware of heritage at every scale, from the territory to the city to the building scale. I mean, territory means landscape, and landscape means natural or agricultural or historical landscapes that we need to bear in mind, whatever the change we are going to make to our territory. At the city scale, there are historical districts, or we have entire historical cities that have at the same time physical, like cultural heritage in terms of in the form of objects or buildings, but also tradition, and all the values that have been shaping the culture of the people and the community which live in the city. And last but not least, the buildings. Like every building, historical buildings, buildings with high architectural value, buildings with a certain historical value or symbolic value that for the community have a meaning and then represent a significant element within the urban landscape. All of these elements, no matter the scale, are going to be affected, and so indirectly the heritage is going to be affected, whatever modification we make to the built environment without the right approach, without having.
In relation with this pandemic and protection of cultural heritage, and the relation with cultural heritage protection and the professionals' work. What happened? These workers are going every day to the museums, historical sites, historic buildings, or they go only once a week, or they work from their houses. In that case, what happened with the monitoring of cultural heritage? And what happened with the problem with the structure of the object? This situation, this pandemia situation, is very complex, and the cultural heritage take the worst parts in this, I think. What do you think about that?
Okay, cultural heritage and the pandemic. As you said, cultural heritage workers and the cultural heritage sector was not immune from the impact of this pandemic and the following lockdown. You've mentioned the challenges that have been faced by the cultural heritage workers, because not all the institutions had the capacity and were prepared to work remotely or to cover all the aspects of their functioning from, let's say, from a remote condition, which means sometimes the security needs or the environmental control needed physical persons to be there and take care of them, which of course implies challenges for the staff to be deployed and to take care, of course, of their own personal safety within this specific emergency. On the other hand, in my opinion, we can learn from this experience, and this is really the evidence that when we don't have a disaster risk management plan in place, disruptions are much more difficult to handle. So no matter what the plan is covering, the disruption itself can be always better handled if we have in place some measures to mitigate any sort of impact. I'm now thinking digitalization. We use digitalization to protect our archives or our collections and to have a copy of them in case of earthquake or flood or fire, right? So to save what we had and the memory of the idea of what we had, or for restoration purposes. However, in this very specific condition, digitalization would have helped a lot in saving, in moving remotely our activities, and so in having a virtual platform for the museum to keep operating and to keep the dialogue open with users, researchers, people who want to access and enjoy the heritage and the collection in the museum. So keeping this dialogue open, also in view of the future reopening, I think would have been extremely helpful. And this shows the difference between having something in place and having no measure at all. Now the time to start considering how to handle the reopening, thinking about, first of all, to the priority of course, the human health, human safety, which implies reconsidering what are the available spaces in our museums and how can we use them in response to the mutated needs, to the new actually requirements, like distancing requirements. So in accordance with the new measures, how can we enable the staff to work safely, visitors to enjoy safely what we have within our museums, and how to rearrange our galleries or redistribute the pathways and the movement flows inside and outside. How do we regulate the access? How we maintain the safety measures in place, although we make these changes? And how do we relate the new measures to the existing emergency plan that doesn't have to be changed, or it may be improved?
Estimada Monia, de acuerdo a tu investigación, ¿cuáles serían, desde tu clasificación, los tipos de desastre?
So thanks for this question. I think I'm going to give a slightly different answer to this question, because I'm not going to classify disasters, but I'm going to try and give a definition of disaster and trying to understand what are the elements that we need for a disaster to happen. So disasters are a disruption of the functioning of a system that overcome the ability of the system to face them, to cope with them and recover from them. For a disaster to happen, we need two key elements. On one side, we need hazards, a hazardous situation, and on the other side, we need vulnerable conditions. Hazards are agents with the potential to generate an impact, to generate damage, loss, that can be physical, economic, social loss. But the hazard is just a hazard, and the potential of the hazard manifests itself when they meet vulnerable conditions. Vulnerable conditions, on the other hand, they are the outcome of physical, social, economic processes that undermine the stability of the system and make them more susceptible to the impact of the hazard. So with this perspective in mind, if you look at disasters now with this understanding, it is clear that without social processes making the system vulnerable, an actual hazard doesn't turn itself into a disaster. So it's very common, although incorrect, to try to make the distinction between natural disasters and human-made disasters, what we define as disaster. So to go back to the question, I'm not going to classify disasters, but I really would like to remind that they are seldom the outcome of natural processes, and they are almost all the times the outcome of social processes.
Nos gustaría saber cuál es el grado de alcance de tu investigación, cuál es el alcance territorial y cuánto espectro abarcó tu investigación.
My research is about cities and disaster risk. In particular, I'm studying urban public open spaces, which is the system of streets and squares within our cities, and urban vulnerability to earthquakes. Why? Because I believe that vulnerability at the city scale is not just about buildings and people, but there is also a spatial component that needs to be understood. So what I'm trying to do is looking at space, like the spatial configuration of our cities, looking at how we plan our space, how we use it, and trying to understand if and to what extent these elements have an impact on the production and progression of urban vulnerability. The aim is understanding the impact on disaster risk production to have an idea of where to operate for disaster risk reduction, so that the moment we understand the potentials of space, we can integrate the disaster risk reduction measures at the urban scale.
Se realizan investigaciones de tipo tan específica, pero a la vez de temas tan amplios, a veces cuesta mucho la adaptabilidad de esos instructivos o revisiones en otros países y otros continentes. De acuerdo a lo mismo, me gustaría saber de qué manera sugieres la adaptación de tu investigación para nuestro continente.
My research is not designed to investigate one single city. Once completed, it's going to provide theoretical and methodological tools to understand the spatial functioning in relation to disaster risk reduction. And so it's going to be used and will be used, hopefully, no matter the context and no matter the scale of the city. I'm currently working with Italian case studies, which are historical settlements in central Italy, but I'm doing that to understand the spatial functioning in relation to earthquakes. But once the method will be completed, it will hopefully be useful and equally applicable to every other context, from Italy to Europe.
In my name and Richard's name, we say thank you very much for this interesting interview and for the time you take to answer this question. We are very grateful with you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, it was a pleasure to meet all of you, and thanks for having me today.